Stop putting off until tomorrow what you can do today. How many times have you heard that? But does it work? You know, it's a very common problem that almost all of us have at one stage or another. Procrastination, where we just keep putting it off and off until the very last minute, until that moment when we have no choice, we've got to get it done. So how do you overcome procrastination? Hi, I'm Patrick Wannis, celebrity life coach, human behaviour and relationship expert, and clinical hypnotherapist PhD. Over 5 million people have read my material, message and teachings in my pocketbooks throughout the US and Canada in English and Spanish. I've also been featured on E!, VH1, Mike and Juliet Show, Montel Williams, Fox News, MSNBC, and many newspapers and magazines throughout the country. And today, I'd like to talk to you and share with you some techniques that I share with my clients. Some of my clients are celebrities and they're high-profile people. Some of them are MLMers, and other people have small businesses and big businesses. Some work at home, some work in an office, some are single parents, some are separated and divorced. In fact, in other words, I work with anyone who's willing and ready to change and make a positive change in their life. And many people, many clients come and say to me, Patrick, I have a real challenge with procrastination. I just put things off and I don't know why and I don't know what to do about it. Can you help me? And I say, of course I can. So the first thing to understand is, what is procrastination? If we look at it, what we're really doing is simply ignoring a task that we have to do. We're ignoring it until we can no longer ignore it. Why is that? Why do we ignore it? Because we've associated a certain emotion and thought with doing that task. Now, for most of us, it might just say, you know what, it's boring, or it's uncomfortable, or I'm afraid. Now, notice there's emotions there. One can be bored and like, oh, it's frustrating, or it's overwhelming, it's too much, I don't know how to take it on. Or I'm afraid of doing it because it's too much for me to take it on. Or I'm scared of something else. I'm scared that I'm going to make a fool of myself. So procrastination can relate to picking up the phone and making a call, as say, for example, with a prospect. It might be about writing something. It might be about recording something. It might be about making a presentation or pitch. It might be adding up some bills, doing your accounting. Step number 1 to overcoming procrastination is to be aware of what are you associating with that task. For most of us, it's obviously an uncomfortable feeling. So write down, what do you associate with that task? So if you have a problem pitching or prospecting, write out, what do you actually feel about that? And maybe think, well, ultimately I feel uncomfortable. Okay, and what is that uncomfortable feeling you're having? And you'll say, well, you know, I don't like to make cold calls, or I don't like to stand up in front of people. Okay, I understand that because most people experience that. What is it that makes you uncomfortable and you don't want to do it? And you say, well, I'm afraid. Oh, okay, what are you afraid of? Well, I'm afraid I might make a fool of myself if I say the wrong thing. I'm afraid of getting stuck. I'm afraid of the other person rejecting me. I'm afraid of the other person saying no. Now we're getting in touch with your emotions and what you fear. Now we can start to work on what is that fear and how can we change that fear. And in some of my other messages on principles of success, I actually teach you how to overcome the fear of rejection and how to overcome anxiety. So I hope you'll get to watch the whole series of these videos. But there's some other points to be made about procrastination. For some of us, we simply don't want to do it because it's overwhelming, and so we put it off until the afternoon, and then after lunch we're full, and by the end of the day we go, oh, I just don't have any energy left. So, prioritize what it is that you have to do, number 1. Number 2, the hardest task is the task you should take on first thing in the morning, whatever it is, because that's when you have the most amount of energy and the most amount of confidence in the beginning of the day, at the top end of the day, not at the bottom. Don't do it after lunch when you feel drained and you feel heavy. Step number 3, once you've identified what it is that's preventing you from doing it, start working on that challenge. So if it's, you know, I'm afraid and uncomfortable of picking up the phone because someone might say no. Then what we do is we shift your perception to, well, what would happen if they said no? Well, I'd feel stupid, Patrick, or I'd feel dumb, or I'd lose my confidence. Okay, but what are they saying no to? Are they saying no to you or to the product and service you're offering? Oh, yeah, you're right. They're not saying no to me, they're saying no to what I'm offering. That's right. Not everyone can say yes. Because, for example, I have a lot of clients who do MLM. Well, there might be about 1,000 different MLM businesses. If I called you and offered you 10, could you do all 10? Of course not. So at some stage I'm going to have to say no. Doesn't mean I don't like you, it means it's not a fit for me. The other thing is when you focus on helping and contributing to the other person, it's easier to overcome your fear of rejection or your fear of failing. The other thing is, to help you overcome, say, the fear of making cold calls, practice at home. The more you practice, the wittier you become, the faster responses you create. I mean, for me to sit here in front of this camera and talk to you doesn't come naturally. I wasn't born talking in front of the camera, but with more practice, I got better at it. So you practice. Did you notice what I said? Practice and rehearsal. So view some of these fears, some of these obstacles as practice and rehearsal for the next one. Now, see, that leads me to the next point. You don't give such an intensely emotional attachment to each of these tasks. When you remove the emotional attachment and you say, well, it's just a practice, it's just a rehearsal, I'm using it as a stepping stone, I'm using it to learn for the next client, for the next call, then it takes off that pressure and you're not worried as much of failing. The final tip to help you overcome procrastination is chunk it down. That's a term that we use in neuro-linguistic programming. That means when you're facing this big task, and it looks really big, and it seems overwhelming, break it down into smaller tasks. So once you start breaking it down into a smaller task, each time that you do something, you reward yourself. It can be a pat on the back, it can be a glass of water, it can be taking a 10-minute break. Something small that says, well done, Patrick, you've succeeded, you got this done. Then that encourages you and motivates you to do the next step. Also, with chunking it down, when you look at this big task and you break it into its small components, find whichever is the hardest one and try that one first. Because if you break through that biggest barrier, through that hardest step, the rest will come very easy. So remember, there are ways to overcome procrastination. It's simply about changing the way you look at things, prioritizing, being well organized, doing it first thing in the morning and not making it about you. Focus on your message, focus on how you're going to help other people, and remember, all of these small steps are just rehearsals and practice for the bigger and even more significant steps. From Patrick Wallace, I wish you the very best. Thank you for being with me.